continue to learn and grow together in our faith and in our walks in our lives with our Savior Jesus. For those of you who don't know me, as I'm a little bit of a new face up here, I am Vicar Jordan here at Peace, which is a fancy word to say I'm a pastor intern. So I work with the other pastors here at church, that is Pastor Dave, James, and Mark, and I'm studying and learning with them to be a pastor myself someday. So I get to join in and have the opportunity to teach, to work with the worship, and to get to know you guys, which looks differently right now. So if you happen to see my face around and haven't gotten to talk to me before, if and when we're back together and able to see each other again, feel free, probably not give a high five right now, but just to come up and say, "Hey Jordan, I'm so-and-so," and let me know who you are so I can get to know you as well. But in the meantime, we get to learn and grow together in our faith as we continue walking through our journey of learning more about the Bible this year. Today we're talking about a topic about facing temptation as a Christian. Before we even get into that topic, though, I want to redirect our focus a little bit and talk about not temptation, but some things that are a little more enjoyable in our lives. So before we talk about this, we're going to alter our attention and look at what are your core values. For this, I'd like you to go grab a piece of paper or write something down in a journal if you'd like to write, or find someone in your family and talk to them about this question. What are your core values? What are those things that are the foundation of your life? Those things that are most important to you, and then a couple reasons of why they mean that much to you, why they shape your life in this way. So go ahead and either jot that down or talk about that with someone else in your house, and I'll see you back shortly. And welcome back after that little activity. If you haven't got the chance to talk about those values yet, go ahead and pause the video and do that right now. But if you have, then let's continue on. And to do so, I'd like to show you a few of my core values for this activity. Those are these three things of my health, my relationships, and my faith. Now, those three things are important to me. My health, because I like to be active and get outside and run. You don't have to like running. That doesn't have to be your value by any means. I happen to enjoy it, so I invest back into that. And as a result, I make that a value that I keep in my life. Next one is my relationships, things like my family and my friends. These are important things for me to invest into those people, to give back to them, to listen and spend time with them. So those relationships are important for my life. And finally, my faith. That faith that is rooted in Jesus. It's actually that faith that shapes so many other aspects of my life, including my relationships and my health. Because of my faith, I want to take extra care of those people that are important, those relationships I have in life. I also want to take care of my health so I can continue talking to people about my faith and take care of my health in a spiritual way. So these are all very important values in my life. You may have similar ones or entirely different ones. But as we talk about those things that are important to us, now let's look at that idea of facing temptation as a Christian that we mentioned before. So to do so, we're going to look at a verse together that's going to guide us today, a verse from 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So we'll go ahead and read that now. Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. So in these couple verses we get to read, there's a couple themes that people encounter. There's a common thing that runs through it of people, you and I, that encounter temptation and encounter God. So we're going to take a look at those in a couple different ways, but start with encountering temptation, how people encounter temptation. So as we think about how we face and encounter those temptations in life, let's first ask, what is this word temptation? You probably hear it in the church, but what does it actually mean? So what is temptation? Well, temptation is something that alters our attention. It takes what we were paying attention to and leads us to think about something different. In this way, it redirects our focus. It is something that when we are looking at those things that are important to us, when we're thinking about what we might be meant to do in this moment, maybe it's paying attention in some class, maybe it's doing some chores at home, we can be tempted to redirect our focus or to alter our attention. Or maybe it's even just spending time with some family and realizing, I don't really want to do this right now. It's not too hard to pick up a phone and look at some other screen or redirect our attention elsewhere. But the core of temptation is something that leads us away from our core beliefs. Those very core foundational values we talked about before. Those things that drive and are important for every aspect of our lives are the very things that we're tempted to move away from. It's in these moments of temptation that we compromise our beliefs. Ultimately, temptation leads us into sin. And sin is that separation from God. It is those things we do that lead us away from God, that direct us away from His focus, from living in His Word, from living a life with Him. Temptation itself is not the same as sin, but it's the thing that leads us back to sin. So it's not wrong for us to be tempted because we all face temptation. But it is that temptation that leads us back into sin. So having established some about this, let's look at a verse from Proverbs that talks about temptation. This is from Proverbs chapter 27. The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. So first of all, what does the word prudent mean? We need to know what this means before we can talk about what it is. So to be prudent is to look ahead, to think forward, to plan about these things, literally to have common sense. But let's condense all that into one word. To be prudent is to be wise. So let's think of the prudent as a wise person. So the wise person sees danger and hides themselves. That is to say that that person who is wise, who has that common sense, sees temptation, realizes that it's before them. Like if I am hungry and I really want to eat something, I want a meal, but the first thing I find is a bucket of ice cream, I'm tempted now to eat that ice cream. If I'm wise, I might realize if I want to take care of my health, I won't make that ice cream my meal and I'll do something else. But even beyond that, the wise person thinks ahead, thinks that if I'm hungry and I open up the freezer, I know there's dessert in there. I know I'll find these things, so I won't put myself in that situation in the first place. Compared to the simple person who goes on and suffers for it, who doesn't think ahead, who simply lives as they do, and when they encounter temptation, it's much harder to resist it because they haven't prepared and thought about it. A simple way I have encountered temptation is in the terms of procrastination. I would consider myself a professional procrastinator, or maybe to say it in a different light, a delayed scheduler. It's easy to encounter maybe some assignment or this thing that needs to get done and say, that's not due until Friday. I can wait till tomorrow. I can spend another day. But the more I wait, the more stress piles up at the last second. And for any of you who are professional procrastinators like me, you know what that's like when you come before that assignment and realize I have to do this now. There's no more time to wait. It's very stressful in the moment. And because we put it off for so long and didn't think ahead about it, now it's there and we can't avoid it. It's in this way that someone who doesn't think ahead and doesn't prepare for that temptation, for those dangers, the things that lead us into our distractions, encounters them and is unable to will themselves out of it. We don't have that much willpower to stop ourselves from sinning and finding our ways into temptation. If we did, we could just choose ourselves not to do it. But there are very serious temptations we encounter that aren't just procrastination or wanting to eat a bucket of ice cream, but can be a desire, an inner hunger, not just for something physical, but a craving. Craving something like attention, affection, the desire of someone else, maybe a relationship, things we crave for and want can lead us away from those core values into those things that we desire for. And if we're not prepared for them, we can find ourselves compromising our beliefs in order to get them. This is the danger we face of temptation, of every person faces. It's nothing unique to Christians. It's nothing unique to a young generation. It's nothing unique to those who are older. It's something we all face, but in different ways. So having talked about temptation, let's look at our Bible verse again from 1 Corinthians. And let's break this apart into different sections as we look at it, starting with, "Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall." This passage, this beginning sentence is very similar to that verse we read in Proverbs. For those who think they are able to stand on their own, who have their own willpower and can will themselves out of temptation, they're much more likely to fall. Because our own will isn't enough for us to overcome the most carnal desires we have. Then no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. The things we experience, the desires for attention, affection, to have people around us, they are common to all people. We all experience the roots of temptation in different ways, kind of like we all have core values that shape who we are, but we experience temptation in very unique ways. My experience with procrastination is something you may be familiar with, and at the same time, it's unique to you. If I think about the temptations I had when I was in junior high and high school just a few years ago, that's going to be vastly different than your experience now. They might have common roots, they might be common to people, but it's unique to you. So to encounter those unique temptations, if we just leave it there that, well, we all face it and it exists, there's not much hope in that message. So we can't just stop there. We continue reading through this verse. God is faithful. God is faithful. There's so much in that phrase, we're actually going to skip over it for now and come back to it. And he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. Well, now that we read that, beyond your ability sounds like I should be able to will myself out of temptation. So once again, we need to keep going on before we can talk about this. We'll move on to the next little phrase. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape. Now we're getting somewhere, a way of escape. But let's look at the final passage, and then we'll work backwards through this, that you may be able to endure it. Right there, endure it. We want to persevere beyond the temptation. So how do we do that? We talked about the temptation, but let's talk about God. So let's walk back from enduring it to finding that way of escape. What is the way of escape? The way that we can overcome temptation, that it doesn't rule us, that it doesn't redirect and alter our focus whenever it so wills against what we would initially innately desire. Well, the answer is right before us. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But we walk back into the conundrum of our own willpower is not enough. which would be a narrow way of talking about our abilities as what we are capable of ourselves. Think back to that list, whether it's in front of you or whether you talked about it with someone else, about those core values in your life. Look over them, reflect on them. Those are part of your ability. The relationships that are valuable to me are part of my ability. So those people around me are an important part of my ability to resist temptation. Those core values, the people around us, the things we have in our lives, all contribute to our ability to find a way of escape and endure temptation. And it all starts with this key middle passage. God is faithful. God is faithful in giving us ways to increase our ability to resist temptation, to be wise and think before we encounter it, to have people who enable us to experience it, but to face it with the confidence that we don't have to redirect our focus to it. It is based in God's faithfulness through our Christian faith, through our identity with Jesus. Through that faith we have that Jesus himself came down to free us from sin, to restore us to God, to give us that life. It's by that faithfulness, that God is faithful, that enhances our ability, that is a part of our ability to face temptation on a daily basis, in every aspect of our lives. And by that ability, we can endure. That is how we face temptation as a Christian. But let's make a plan to go forward with that. If we just stop there, it might not quite connect for all of us. So here's our plan for facing temptation. We broke it down into 3 steps. Step 1 is to prepare for temptation beforehand. We know we will be tempted. We know that sin exists and we'll be led towards it at points in our lives. So knowing that will happen, let's prepare for it to happen. Let's acknowledge that we're going to be in those situations so that we don't just walk blindly forward until we face it, but we expect it to come. So step number 1, prepare for temptation beforehand. Step number 2, anticipate how you are personally tempted. Like we said before, temptation has those unique roots for each of us, or those unique experiences for each of us, but it's found in common roots. But those common things are experienced uniquely. So know that you yourself are tempted in ways that no one else truly is, even if they have a similar experience. So continue to learn about yourself. Learn from yourself, from your own reflection, from those around you, about what you value, how those values can be compromised and tempted. And then identify so you can anticipate those unique temptations. And finally, number 3, redirect your focus to the core of your identity. Just like we did today, establish those values, the most important things in your life. And after you've established that, now we know those things that we're being directed from so we can maintain our focus on them. And in all this plan, know we will fail. We will not always succeed in facing temptation. We will succumb to it. But despite that, God is faithful. And he'll forgive us. So we can get back up on our feet, go back to our plan, and prepare, anticipate, and redirect our focus back to those important things in life. So one final thing for us today, to put this plan into action, I have a challenge for you. A challenge to face that temptation. by preparing, anticipating, and redirecting it. So that challenge for this week is to write down on a sticky note, a note card, or just a piece of paper, write down one temptation you will face this week and how you will prepare for it. A couple examples that might be, maybe you prepare for patience with my siblings. Knowing I will need patience with them, I prepare to have some extra patience. Or anticipating procrastination, that I'm going to put something off, so I'll anticipate that coming. And it can be a very deep personal thing for you. It could be a very simple thing. But identify one temptation and a way you either prepare, anticipate, or redirect it when you encounter it. So that's our challenge for this week as we face temptation as Christians. But as we continue to do that, go with this promise that your God is faithful. Thank you for joining us for this week, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. God's blessings.